It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. Podcasting. Hello, gentlemen. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
I'm Peter Lawrence.
I'm Eric Schneider.
And I'm Alec Paskowitz.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And today we're going to talk about right to repair. So they just passed right to repair in Colorado for farm stuff. I don't know the details. It's the first one to pass. They've had it in other countries. So we've got Eric with us to talk more on the tech side. And we have Alec, the farm boy, Paskowitz here. He's got the cow behind him. He grew up on a farm and he knows about tractors and stuff. So we asked him to be here. And Peter was grandfathered in. So
I just came along for the ride, just like Kyle.
Yeah, right. So what is right to repair?
You want me to go all in on it?
Let's go on start with the farm, and then we'll go with the other side of things.
Cool. Yeah, so I grew up on a kind of medium-sized dairy farm, and so we had tractors, but they were generally kind of older tractors because we were just not farming that many acres. So basically, my dad would repair most of the things that went wrong with our tractors. I'd say probably 80 to 90% of things that went wrong with the tractor, my dad was either able to fix himself, or we had like a friend who would come over and fix our tractors because he was really good with the mechanical stuff. And then there was probably 10 to 20% of stuff that we needed to either have like an official person fix it or just go to a local store because they have the more specialized parts. So that's kind of always been a really important part of farming, is being able to fix your own stuff, because when you're using your farm equipment out in your fields, your crops are ready to harvest. And if your tractor breaks down, you need to get back up as fast as you can, because if, say, something takes 2 weeks to fix, your stuff is rotting out in your fields.
You never are like, I'm going to drive my tractor around just in case I'm going to start planting today, or I'm going to start harvesting today, right? It's always,
right.
I'm going to let it sit, then I'm going to start it up and go do the work.
Right. The harvest, like stuff gets ready to harvest, like at different intervals that are really spread out so that everybody can get their stuff in to get fixed. Or maybe it just all happens at once. Like the busiest time is the harvest.
Right.
That's the worst time. So if if stuff breaks, it's more likely that you're going to have a delay.
Yeah. So where the right to repair stuff comes in is tractors have gotten a lot more complicated. New tractors have a ton of computer stuff, a ton of safety systems. When you're harvesting in your cornfield, you're basically not driving the tractor. You're sitting in there while your tractor is driving itself, because it's specifically set up for how wide your rows of corn are. And so it's basically driving itself. So there's a ton of technology in there. And if something goes wrong, you can be locked out of being able to fix your tractor, is where all of the right to repair stuff comes in. So even if you had the know-how and technical skills to be able to fix whatever's wrong, there are a lot of cases where you'd need to plug in a specific diagnostic device from the manufacturer before you'd be able to fix anything. And those were only available to licensed repair shops. So the right to repair, there's kind of two ideas of it. First is the right to repair it yourself. So you want to have access to these diagnostic tools. And second, you want third parties to be able to repair. So specifically, John Deere has come under fire for it, but they've actually, in January, already allowed their diagnostic tools to third-party systems. And that's part of what people want in right to repair. So now you don't need to go to a licensed John Deere dealer to get your stuff fixed. It's available for more people now.
Just to have your check engine light
right, exactly.
tested and turned off, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is really analogous to how much more complicated cars have gotten too. Like old cars, people are able to fix a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And new cars, everything's just jammed in there. It's really hard to get at everything. And it's the same way for tractors.
I could fix old cars. I could work on a lot of stuff without much knowledge. Like, oh, here's the bolts. There's the belt. It's like right in front of you. Now I have to remove part of the hood to get the battery out.
Yeah. Well, and it's similar with the diagnostic tools you were mentioning, right, Alec? That there's specialized ones for BMW and for Mercedes and whatnot that not every like local repair shop may have those diagnostic tools to even check what the problem is in the first place.
Yeah, like to make something proprietary, if that is always from a profit motive or just like you have a very specific design, hearing ideas, that's just what you make, and it's different from what other people are doing.
Well, and part of it, comes to like our jobs, right? So internal apps that we write for clients aren't necessarily as pretty or as usable as the external facing apps might be, right? So if we're writing a tool for just IT, that's going to be a lot different than if we're writing a tool for, say, C-suite, right? If the C-suite wants something, it's going to have to be, pretty colors, big buttons, things like that. If it's, command line tools for, our industry are legend. I've just been using some today to diff, giant files, and it's just like, oh, command line, bloop, 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 done. And that just wouldn't fly in a lot of places. So I think, to John Deere's point, they can make changes whenever they feel like it, and their dealers would have to get those changes or that kind of operation, right? So you could argue a little bit to that point, like, well, we own it, we can make changes when we want, and we don't have to get anybody to like, oh no, you guys really need to upgrade because we made this super important security change. And browser manufacturers are facing that same thing, right? Like if you don't upgrade Chrome for a decade, you're probably going to have a few risky security transactions to take care of.
Yeah,
something like that.
I've been working on PCs because of games. I always had to upgrade. That's how I got into the business. I had an all-in-one sound card modem. And I tried to play Diablo online. The sound, that was all modular. I could fix that myself. Dells have always been really easy to get them to send parts, and they have a lot of field replaceable units, stuff like that. So I don't think that it's a lot of, I don't think it's everybody that is, going to be impacted by right to repair legislation. Now, a wise man once told me that the difference between Apple and Microsoft sees is that Microsoft is a software company that makes operating systems. So Apple stuff is Apple stuff that requires Apple stuff. They were using Intel stuff for a while.
Yep.
They've done the amazing M1 stuff, which is I think it's phenomenal.
A hardware company, M2.
Yeah, but it's always been way more difficult to Mac stuff, and the whole iPhone thing, every new one has a different adapter, and that's been a point of frustration for people. So I think they've come under fire the most because their stuff has been the most proprietary.
But it hasn't always been that way. It's changed over time. They actually, like when they came about in the first place, like in the Wozniak era, that was actually their edge was, they were going up against IBM, and IBM was the Apple of that era where it's all proprietary. You don't own anything. It's all, you have to license it from them or you lease it from them. And if you don't follow the lease, they take it back. Right. And all the repairs and everything have to be done through them. And then Apple comes along with Apple II and that, and it comes with diagrams. The parts are, you can get them. It's like everything is discrete where you can do component level repairs and
off the shelf components and
just normal everyday stuff that you could get at Radio Shack back when Radio Shack was a thing. And so they've gone from that, and it wasn't just like they did that until they didn't. Like I think it's been a slow changeover to what it is today. But, if you ask them, I think it's to serve the design of their products where, so if you take like a laptop these days, where maybe 15 years ago, the battery would be removable. You remember that, where you could just like pull a little lever and the battery would come out. You could pop a new battery in. They eliminated that because all of the extra like casing around the battery and then the slot that you have to put it in, interface for it, and then all the parts for actually like having the mechanism to eject it and everything takes up a lot of space. If you eliminate that and just have the battery built in, then now the laptop is smaller, right? It's sleeker. So I'm not arguing that there's not another way to do it, but that was their design aesthetic, because they wanted it to be slim. So same with all the components. Like it used to be, you'd open up a Mac, you could take the memory out, you could take the hard drive out and swap them, do some minor upgrades. It was easy, but they eliminated that because from their perspective, even and this was like SATA was worse, but now with like the NVMe and those, even just having the connector in there with this and having the spot allocated to put the screw in and everything. Yeah, that stuff every time you have a connector inside of a computer, it takes up space. And so if they just build the main board where there's one board that has everything just soldered on, then if you open up a Mac today, the overall dimension inside, like less than 25% of it is computer, and the other 75% is battery.
Right. And
so that's where they get. And I'm not saying that the marketing is true, but that's where they can get supposedly 22 hours of battery life out of their laptops, is because the whole thing is just full of battery, So there are advantages to their design, but there are trade-offs, and right to repair is a huge one.
Well, repairability in general, right? Not just right to repair, but repairability.
Right.
When you solder the memory on, you have to have some pretty specialized skills and heat sinking and everything like that if you want to change the memory. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are all, and modern components are all surface mount components. And so, when they're, it's really easy for them to automate that in a factory, put those components on easily. But removing them and replacing them with something else requires very specialized equipment and very specialized, knowledge and skills to do it. Thousands of dollars worth of equipment potentially to do that type of a repair. Which I think so getting back to right to repair, then I think that's why it's a good question of like, well, who is the target for that? Are we talking about the manufacturer run, like certified places, the independent, like a car repair shop, like you go to a computer repair shop, and it's reasonable that they could have the thousands of dollars of tools needed to do some of these repairs,
right? Versus
the folks in this podcast of I've got electronics repairs tools on the bench behind me. I have a soldering iron and some basic stuff, but not nearly enough to fix my iPhone. Right. I would just bring it into an Apple shop or an Apple store.
When I started doing desktop support back in 1999, right before Y2K, I got Dell certified so I could do warranty repair work for my own company, because it's easier for me to get parts and fix them than to send it in. So, but I just had to take a test and sign up for it. Anybody could do that. Who is this? The idea that anybody's going to be able to fix their stuff? They have to make it so that anybody can fix it.
Yeah, Alec, can you repair a 2023 John Deere tractor now if right to repair passes? Or
personally, I'm probably more qualified than my dad is, at least with the computer stuff. But I think basically there's two parts: is repair it yourself and open repairs to kind of the open market. Farmers will gain skills and become more savvy because that's what they've done ever since they've been farmers. You're doing so many things as a farmer. You learn stuff as you go. My dad would even say he's not that mechanically inclined, and he's able to fix most of a tractor.
Right.
So I think there are going to be some farmers who are really into technology who will be able to fix stuff on their own. But where it's really going to help is where you don't have to go to the manufacturer to have some stuff fixed. I was reading some literature on the Colorado bill, and some farmers were reporting 8 weeks wait for repair during harvest time. And at that point, you have to hire someone else to harvest your crops, or your crops are gone.
Right.
And at that point, you've spent up to $1 million even on some of these machines, and then then you have to pay someone else to use their machines to do it for you.
Yeah, that's insane, because you're running pretty tight when you're running a farm. You don't have a lot of extra cash laying around, so that could bankrupt the farm.
It's sort of an up-down business, right? You're doing the farming or you're sitting around watching the crops grow, right? Like there's not much in between. Like, obviously you're going to take care of your equipment, and in the case of your farm, you're going to take care of the animals and things like that. But it's not one of those things where you're actively going to be using machines constantly and being able to wait 8 weeks. And the same goes for phones, right? Could you wait 8 weeks without a phone these days?
No.
I couldn't do it.
8 minutes.
No way. I wouldn't be able to drive anywhere.
You could still print out in Google Maps, I'm pretty sure. But
I don't own a printer.
That's a good point. And even if you did, I mean, you take one wrong turn, and then now you're just sunk, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's no recovery from printouts. You got to match the path.
So does Apple have to make an iPhone that has screws that fit a Phillips screwdriver? Everything, all the ports have to be standard. I know
not just Apple.
Forced to go US. Like, how far do they have to go to make things field repairable? Is everything a field repairable unit?
And I think I think we should talk about what the experience is today, because right, so on the electronic side, right to repair is a thing in some places, and I think even New York has. There's something got passed in maybe just December last year, and it hasn't got into effect yet, but it's gonna force some stuff, and as far as phones and some basic stuff, exempting things that are already covered by other legislation, but Apple would have to abide by this. And so in an attempt to kind of get ahead of this, they've opened up the self-service repair portal, they call it. And I think it's limited today. So it's really only for phones, and it's only even then for batteries and for screens, which are the common repairs, right? Right. Those are reasons. And batteries especially I would consider a wear part, where they wear out. Like, you have to replace them eventually. Like, it doesn't matter how well you take care of your phone, the battery will wear out. The screens are common just because you drop it once and it's broken, but the batteries you have to replace. So they're kind of targeting that. But the process is, you can sign up. You don't have to be certified or anything. You can be average Joe, and you can order the parts. But they want you to use their process and their tools and everything. So you can borrow or rent the tools from them. You could buy them too, but obviously most people are going to just want to use them temporarily. So you rent them. You put down a $1,200 deposit to rent them. Yeah.
Well, so what are these tools then? Are they made of gold, platinum, and wires?
Yeah. So I do own a printer. So I printed out this picture to show you what you get when you rent the tools from them. You get these two big cases.
I'm looking at gigantic otter boxes, basically.
Yeah.
And
they have like handles. So if you need to move them around, they have an extended handle that extends, so they wheel around your house like luggage. And in there is like 3 or 4 bench tools and some hand tools and some jigs and stuff that help you heat up the screen in a very particular way so that you can release the adhesive, and a jig where you can open up the phone safely so that you don't break any of the connectors inside, and tools to take the screws out and whatnot that you have to take out. And then, all the parts you need to put the new seal back in and heat it and press it back together, and put the battery in because batteries are very sensitive. So you got to put just the right amount of pressure and whatnot. So there's all these specialized tools that you need to do that. And then, you Netflix tear off the label and send all those tools back when you're done. I guess the other thing is you also, all these parts are like paired. There's parts pairing. So anytime you swap any of these parts, like the rest of your phone has to be cool with the new part you put in. Yeah. And so you have to call or do some sort of portal or phone in thing where you have to then resync the phone so that it's good with the new parts and everything through Apple. And that takes time. So,
DRM
it's like replacing an organ, connecting your new liver.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So, I think the phone will run, but you'll get like constant warnings, and some of the features may be disabled if you don't do that. Like, right. Because Face ID is a security feature. So if it doesn't pair the new camera, then it won't let you do Face ID because it doesn't trust the camera to not be malicious or something. So
evil hackers.
It sounds like they're making it so easy, even my mom could do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like they're going to go in and lobby against these laws with this process, saying we've already got it covered. Like it's technically you can do this, and
it's not right to repair for everyone.
Right.
Or anyone.
It's not ability to repair. It's the right to repair. It's not. You have to make it so simple that a first grader can do it. There's nothing in saying that, and I wouldn't want a cell phone that could be repaired by a first grader. The thing would be, 2 foot by 4 foot with all the discrete
Play
electronics.
School makes those, yeah. They're
Like
giant plastic things.
Yep, my daughter turns 4 on Monday, and that's what she's getting for her birthday is a set of 4-year-old friendly tools. I'm trying to imagine what
a real soldering iron.
Yeah,
and a BB gun. So do you think that like this is going to set things back? Like, is this going to have a negative impact?
Oh, right to repair.
Yeah.
I good question. So I would say that the thing that it does that's good is it puts pressure on some of these companies to compete within the market space for repairs. Because kind of an adjacent thing is piracy, where if you can make like video content, like movies and stuff, like video streaming, if you can make it so easy, so accessible, affordable, and everything to your average person that piracy becomes more challenging, then they win out over piracy, right? Because people will just do that the easier course. So same thing here. Like I think having the option to do it yourself or go to a third party is great, but it would force a company like Apple to compete in the space against those third party, like those other options, right? Instead of like them being the only option. So it's hard to argue that there's a downside to any of this.
Well, in the John Deere case, hopefully it would take the wait time down from 8 weeks, right? Because there's more people that would be able to effectively repair their equipment, and maybe start up some businesses, or maybe just have some ability themselves to do it, or the friend or neighbor down the street that actually has lengthy John Deere experience or whatever. And we're picking on John Deere. It's not just John Deere. It's all the manufacturers are doing this to some extent. They're just the ones that seem to have risen to the top. I don't know if it's the color green or what, but
So I guess the one thing I could think that's a negative is if you are opening it up to where there's third parties, then you're allowing bad actors into the ecosystem then potentially, where how many mall kiosks have you seen that can replace the screen on your iPhone or any phone, right? Like are those kiosks using real parts, like knockoff parts, right? Like and if there's no certification or control or way that the consumer can validate those third parties, then they could sell you a bill of goods that's supposedly they're real parts or whatnot, or they're in good with Apple and they're not. And so then people are getting repairs. Now they have a phone that isn't what Apple would consider the correct experience because it's not the right screen and not the right battery. And other people might look at that phone and be like, oh, well, I thought Apples were good. No,
right.
You only get an hour of battery life. That seems terrible, right?
Right.
It's because
that's a large part of like the tractor manufacturers' argument as well. Is like there's a lot of computer code, and a lot of it is around safety, and a lot of it is around emissions, emission stuff. And so it is illegal to tamper with the emissions and safety stuff. It still will be illegal to tamper with the emissions and safety stuff, but it will probably be easier because anyone can kind of get into the system now. So that's something that these manufacturers are worried about. They're saying, well, we've got a lot of stuff that'll keep emissions down, and with code you can change it to make it a little more fuel efficient but pump out way more CO2, and that's against what the EPA says.
I mean, like I have a camera will only play or only record 30 minutes of video, and that's because there's something different about video cameras versus regular cameras when you import them. some difference in tariffs, stuff like that. So in the firmware, they have it where, but you can get other firmware that will enable it. But the cameras aren't really built to be video cameras. So if you just record for an hour, then it can heat up your phone and kill it.
Lights on fire because it's doing work that it wasn't really intended to be doing, right? So
Yeah.
I know, and to the emissions and to the safety standards things, those are certainly things that, I care about. I've enjoyed the lowering of emissions over my lifetime and seeing the differences and changes, but also, having that impact going forward, I think is important too. But that being said, there's always been sort of a tinkering class around, tractors and cars and computers. And there's always just been that sort of group of folks that like to be a little bit closer to the metal, so to speak.
Overclockers and hackers and whatnot. No, it's just, I think that's just human nature to want to improve things. And there's people that are really interested in doing that. And I think that's how a lot of innovation happens. It's good that we have those kinds of people. But, if think about any device that has a lithium battery, it's set up to charge the battery. But if you put some kind of firmware in there that doesn't limit the charging, so it's always
in a safe fashion, right?
Because you could push that charging to 100% all the time it's plugged in instead of backing it off, and all of a sudden your phone blows up,
turns into a pillow,
and everybody's saying, "Oh, this phone is bad." And that hurts the manufacturer. It's also a safety thing because that's not a fire you can really put out.
Not easily, no.
What do you do, Eric, if your lithium battery starts burning?
Yeah, my advice is throw it outside. You would not be able to put it out yourself. So you shouldn't waste time trying. But I talked to someone else who said they worked at a electronics retail store, and what they were trained to do was they had a fireproof safe. So if something started on fire in the store, you'd stuff it in the safe and close the door and let it burn itself out in the safe, because even they didn't have a way to practically stop the fire, so they just had a way to stop the fire from spreading.
Right. And that's good common sense, right? Like some fires you're just not meant to put out. Chemical fires are pretty dangerous.
So you think that, I know they have to, one of the things I read was providing documentation. How are they going to regulate this?
How is the government going to regulate this?
Yeah, I mean, how are they where is the line? Because we still want them to make cool stuff and innovate and things like that.
Yes.
And engineers need to be free to design things, to do those cool things that we want them to do. If they have to, again, we're back to the play school phone. We don't want to go backwards.
No, and it's funny because even in the VCR times, there were some times that the circuit layout was sent in your instruction manual for the VCR, right? It was probably at the very tail end of, back in my day, we pull apart the TV and start replacing tubes, right? And they had tube testers down at the drugstore that you'd take your tube in and go and test it. And nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. Oh, yep, that one. Go buy a tube and take it back. But we are far, far, far away from that kind of thing.
That brings up a good point too, is if you're taking apart an old TV, there's a capacitor in there.
Oh, yeah.
And to discharge that capacitor. Well, if you make, hey, anybody can work on this. Okay.
As long as you don't discharge it into your heart.
There's safety issues. And then what happens if you're like a do-it-yourselfer and you break it because you're trying to repair it, even though they sent you all those tools? What happens then? They send you the stuff, they give you the diagrams and all of that, and you manage to...
when I change the oil in my lawnmower, I don't void the warranty. I actually make the warranty better, because if I don't change the oil in my lawnmower, then I produce a brick over a long period of years, right? And eventually it's just not going to start and not going to run. And that same kind of thing, there's certain procedures that I have to take. I disconnect the spark plug, and it's clearly laid out in documentation that came with my lawnmower. So I think there's going to be kind of a boundary, or as you say, a different boundary between what's on the side of repair and what's on the side of replace, really. And as a consumer, you have to be willing to take that risk. If somebody sends you 2 giant boxes of equipment and that doesn't scare you, then you're willing to take that risk.
Hold that picture up again.
Yeah.
Here.
Most people I know, if they said, all right, so to replace my battery, all I need to do is open up this, understand everything that's in here, and proceed through these simple steps, and I can replace my phone battery, or I can spend $10 extra and take it into an Apple store. A lot of people are willing to take that $10 and say, that's for me. I mean, I get my oil changed in my car right now at the dealer. I just take it in. I'm like, do it. I don't want to deal with it right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with the waste. I don't want to deal with the purchasing, having the parts on hand, having the tools, none of that. So I just take it in.
I knew a guy that was a gunsmith, so very detail-oriented, mechanical. He did all of the recommended maintenance that they recommended in the manual.
Right.
All it to the letter. He kept a log. He kept all the paperwork.
Yep.
The truck had 380,000 miles on it and it ran great.
And those are amazing things. Yeah. And I mean, there's stories of tractors, to go back to you, Alec. There's tractors that have been running for years and years and years and years, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, most of the tractors that we owned, you could maybe classify them as antiques, but they still work great. They're built to be replaceable. They're built to be worked on. Every piece of it you can swap in something new. Maybe it was the tractor of Theseus. I don't know how much of that tractor was original.
That's awesome. I love that paradox.
But I do think that right to repair, especially in this modern world, is nice to have. It's something that is going to be great. It's nice for the people that want to tinker. It's not going to close down every Apple store and tractor manufacturer in the tri-state area or anything like that. It's going to, those things are going to still exist. Car dealerships still exist.
I think that there's going to be, because I haven't read any of the language of the legislation, I think the way to handle a reasonable expectation. What is reasonable for repairing a device? It's reasonable to let anybody have access to the equipment, the tools, the documentation, not to have them, but to be able to buy them, and or even get certified. So a reasonable thing, and then as much, I guess, just standard stuff. Like Apple was pushed to use USB-C ports on their devices. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I don't know what country said we're not going to let you bring these home.
I think we'll find out what their solution is in September, because they have some options, which would include not having a port at all, because it doesn't say you have to have a USB-C port. It's if you have a port, it's USB-C, so they could just erase the port and be compliant. So we'll find out at the end of the year here what they're,
because you got Bluetooth on there, you got Wi-Fi, wireless charging. I don't want to give them those ideas, though.
I mean, that's another thing, right? Like the headphone jack went away, right? It's gone. I don't know. I'm sure there are phones that have headphone jacks, but not by the top 3 manufacturers anymore. They're just gone. Like, oh, well, everybody either has Bluetooth headphones or they've got an adapter now. Those kinds of changes have been slowly making their way through things. I don't know, like, are SIM cards still a thing? I can't remember if they still have those or if they've gone away just to electronic SIMs now.
It's in a changeover. So some phones still do like dual SIM, where you can have both an eSIM and a physical SIM at the same time. They have two phone connections, but I think that's on its way out, the physical SIM.
Yeah. So these changes do happen over time anyway, in sort of a naturally.
And they're industry wide. Like, it's not like it's a specific manufacturer, because I think there's definitely room for innovation with some of this, where, if you task an engineer in a company like Apple or Samsung to say, like, okay, we need the battery to be replaceable using, like, even if it's just the constraint of, like, it needs to be one of these tubs of tools, not 2, right? Because I think battery is a good example where the reason it's so touchy is we talked about fires and safety before, right?
Right.
Is that the reality of those lithium batteries is that as you use them cycle, they actually get physically bigger and smaller, right? And so Samsung like flew too close to the sun with like the Note, one of the Notes, I forget which model, but where they didn't give it enough room to expand, and so it was getting punctured and starting on fire. So they need to have that. Right, so you need to have that room. So the currently like industry accepted solution to that is you just double side tape the battery into the phone, like against the chassis of the phone,
with the good tape,
with the really good tape. But it's like those 3M things you put on the wall where you can pull it out but they don't always work. Like you got to be real careful when you do those to release it properly. So if that's the current solution, but it's not going to work for your average person, like I'm sure they can come up with a better way to manage that so that it's either it's more reliable or you use more standard tools to get to that point where you're taking it out or whatnot. So
and that could actually cause some innovation that we're not thinking of, right? A lot of side effects come from these kinds of decisions and regulations. It's like, oh, well, that was actually a positive change because of that, and it can happen.
And there's no way that the what's being proposed would regulate these companies out of existence either. Like this, they'll fight against them because they like the control, but
it's easier not to.
Right, but it's not like we're risking putting legitimate cell phone manufacturers out of business or anything like that either.
Right.
Yeah, there's always that question of like motive, just pure profit. They're going to rig it, built-in failure and obsolescence, trickery, hijinks, things like that. I don't think
old trickery.
I don't think there is some good out there in the world.
Well, and they've had to build up
consumer driven. A lot of these companies are consumer driven. They don't want their stuff to break. They don't want their batteries to blow up. They don't want to have
right. And cell phones are I feel like are a special case, but we talked about computers earlier. There is if you're the as Peter said, the tinkerer, if you're the type that wants to be able to swap things, do that sort of work, on the laptop and the computer, tower, like standard like tower PCs, I think have always been tinker friendly. But even on the laptop side, there's a company that started a year or two ago that caters to that market where everything could be taken apart with a normal screwdriver. All of the parts are swappable. You can switch the main board, you can switch the processor, all the RAM, storage, everything. It's all that's their design constraint, is to make it upgradable without having to replace the whole thing. So, there is a market there in computers, but I don't think there's the market is definitely not there for cell phones.
Yeah, I think having the full story, like the engineering perspective, the company perspective on all that stuff. Like you don't have all that, so it's easy to jump to especially in a capitalist. It's assume everybody's got it.
And Apple's done some things with phone recycling too, right? That tend to kind of make it so that they're still trying to recover parts and things like that, and build in some recyclability as well into a lot of their phones and devices.
And we've picked on John Deere a little bit, but also it's good to point out, like, as of this last January, they have made their diagnostic tool available outside of certified John Deere repair and dealerships. So that actually is already done everywhere, not just in Colorado, and that's part of the right to repair bill in Colorado.
Right.
Okay. So they're just deciding to.
I think everybody's recognizing that they might have gone a little bit too far and need to pull back a little ways, right?
Right.
And make these things easy, and having right to repair in front of legislations has probably pushed that a little bit faster than some of the others would have been.
Yeah, and I guess to defend Apple for a moment too is they, some of the decisions they make really are around security. I mean, I feel like Apple does a really good job in the consumer space of advocating for security and privacy and stuff for because their customer is the average consumer, right? So that's who they're serving directly, and they've done a lot to not build backdoors into their systems and make sure that the data is actually secure. And as exploits for their, so it's a fairly classic thing of your phone gets seized by the police want to get into your phone, and Apple doesn't cooperate with that. And moreover, like as exploits are like, because there's a market there for serving police departments and whatnot to build devices that can break into phones. Like as those exploits are known, Apple actually does a lot behind the scenes to make sure that they're not viable in the long term.
Right.
They fix those things, and most consumers would never even know that that's happening, and it's for your own good.
Of course, then I've got a face and a thumb, and they have me and they have my phone. And all
well, so that's it. You can if you're real sensitive about stuff like that, you can if you're about to be arrested or you're about to go through a security checkpoint where you might get arrested or something, you can quickly put your phone into a mode where that's not enough. You can lock it down further where they can't just hold it up to your face and get in.
Do you have any other tips for criminals?
I was saying, like they're getting your but to the point of like people jumping to conclusions. Then people look at parts pairing and stuff like that as like an anti-competitive, anti-right to repair decision. And yes, there's definitely some of that there, but some of that is really to enforce security on those devices and work the way that you actually would want them to work as a consumer if you find yourself in that situation.
Exactly. You don't want to replace the password approver chip with sort of a switch that says, "Yep, everything's good."
So as we're winding down here, getting to the end, do you have any parting thoughts about right to repair?
My parting thought is that right to repair will make it easier to install and run Doom on your combine harvester.
Oh, 100%. I like that.
That sounds like it could go horribly wrong.
Only if you shoot at the wrong point in the field.
Combine is actually like playing Doom in the field, thinks the corn are the targets.
That's right.
As long as it mows them down, we're still okay.
That's right.
Eric,
my parting
are you going to order
is,
some of those parts? You're going to get those giant cases so you can work on iPhone.
Well, so I have two parting thoughts, and that's one of them is right now, like those are the only two options. Is I go into an Apple store and they fix my phone. I go out and get a frozen yogurt for a half hour, and I come back and my phone's fixed, versus waiting a week and getting the giant tubs and then risking breaking my phone by trying to do it myself. Like I'm going to choose the Apple Store, which is what I'm doing today, but I would love there to be more competition in that space. So like, right to repair, giving more third-party options, giving more local repair shops, the ability to exist and get parts and consumer protections around it, certification, whatever, like I think is only for the good. And it keeps Apple on their toes because now they have to compete against that in the market. So that's one thing. The other thing is I really wish that right to repair had better advocates than it does. The most outspoken one that I'm aware of is Louis Rossman. I forget how to pronounce his first name, but in terms of like we talked about cash grabs or whatever, like in motivation, at first blush it seems like he's speaking for the everyman. He wants whatever, but as best I could tell, he's just really out for himself. Where he runs a repair shop, he wants to be profitable. He wants legislation that will make him more money. I don't really think he cares about how any of that could help me. And that's him. And then I really don't know of anybody else in the space that is active and really fighting and a good advocate for right to repair.
I think that it's a good idea. I think that manufacturers, like you were saying with John Deere, they're starting to do it anyway. And I think there's going to be more and more of them moving in that direction. And I think it's one of those like easy, popular bills that you can pass that make you look good as a governing body. It's almost like fan service. So my parting thought is that I think it's just inevitable. Either they're going to start doing it on their own or they're going to get a little nudge and it'll happen. If one manufacturer is doing it and another isn't, even if it's not a law, the manufacturer that's making stuff has an edge in the market and capitalism will just do its thing. Peter mentioned the other day when we were talking about this. I wanted to give credit to that capitalism angle.
My parting thought is that I think this is for the better. I think it still remains to be seen how, but I think it'll help a lot of things overall. And I'm a fan.
I think with that, we'll just say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.